Make some noise for John DeLancie, everyone. Well, so we were just saying, you're no stranger to Halifax. You've been here before. But what brings you here this time besides the con? You got something else going on as well.
I am here to do the concert. Are there any of you who are coming to the concert tomorrow? Oh, there needs to be more people coming to the concert tomorrow. It's an opportunity to listen to so many themes from, great, iconic films, and usually we listen to them, out of a speaker about this size, and here you would be listening to them, being played by a symphonic orchestra.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Is this something you do often, or is this a first for you, or?
No, I've done a lot of work
yeah.
with symphony orchestras before, yeah.
Yeah, and you've done a ton of different things, from film and television, of course, talking about some of the highlights with Star Trek, working on as many different iterations of the show as you have done, which a lot of actors haven't had the chance to do so. How did you feel that it evolved over the course of time?
Oh, you mean the show itself?
Yeah, the show,
or
because you were able to go on
the
Next Generation, you came back, you did Voyager. And
yeah. It's really unusual to be on the show. I mean, there are very few shows that are popular at this level. You begin to know them. When I started Star Trek, there was a lot of question as to whether it was going to be popular. When I went on to, let's say, West Wing, you knew that you were on a show that was working almost within, the first episode. Star Trek took about a year. But it began to build. First of all, they had to get the people on board who were like, no, classic Trek, that's the only thing I'm interested in. And then the show itself didn't quite know where it was going. But as it began to build, you began to feel that you were on a wave. Jonathan Frakes, I came in to do essentially one show a year. And Jonathan said to me, you're sort of the peach, or the, what do you call it, the litmus test. What's happening this year? What do you see as different this year, and what have you? So as the years went on, I could see that, the show was developing into something that was really very solid, yeah.
And about the different, we've seen different crews over the years that you've worked with, and is it interesting for you to come back years later and work with a whole new generation of actors and see how maybe the technology has evolved and how things have changed?
Well, I mean, listen, I wasn't on it for that long. I mean, I did, I think, 9 episodes over a 10-year span.
Yeah.
So that includes Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine. The technologies of the shows were not changing by any means at that point. The casts were changing. Working with Kate Mulgrew, who is a really good friend, was quite fun, but it was not a technological change like there is now, where it's much more. It's just shot differently. That's all. Yeah.
So I guess the big question is, if you were on a Starfleet ship, Picard or Janeway, who would you want at the helm?
Well, I had a great deal of fun with both of them, but there was no question that the scenes that I mean, from an acting point of view, everything is about the scene. And the scenes that I had with Patrick were more of the classic who's on top, kind of aggressive type of, a personality type, scenes. You see, I didn't say who's on top with Kate.
Well, we have a ton of people
here. As a matter of fact, they were very concerned about that.
Yeah.
They were very concerned that Kate would end up somehow playing that she really liked Q, that there was sort of an amorous quality. And I kept on saying, no, we should do that. That's sort of something that the audience would expect, and we can play with that. But they were like, oh, no. So, all right.
Yeah, I know we have a ton of people here in the audience that have a lot of questions, a lot of fans. So we have a mic right over here. Right on the side. So if you have a question, You go ahead and line up, and we'll get to as many of you as we can. Are you already in line? Do you have a question? Yeah. Oh man, let's just get started. Go ahead.
Yeah, the name's not Mike, though. I don't really understand. But anyways, would you speak to the experience of playing a godlike entity from the perspective of an avowed secularist?
Well, it's ironical, isn't it? Maybe I'm the one who's best to be able to play that, because I actually have a point of view. I am, what the gentleman is talking about is that I have made some videotapes about being secular. As a matter of fact, next week, I'm going to be attending the Freedom from Religion Foundation convention, where Salman Rushdie is going to be speaking. I'm going to be speaking. And actually, my speech, which I'm working on in the hotel room tonight, is about lying. Is about lying. And in our country right now, it's so unbelievable. We are drowning in lies. And so I've been able to sort of connect that. I'm afraid, for those of you who might be a little upset by this, but I've been able to connect that a little bit with the early education, or some early education. I remember as a little kid being told, Jonah lived in a whale. And I said, well, how's that possible? How's that possible? Well, it's true. He did live in a whale. And it's always upset me in terms of all the things that are wonderful about spirituality, that you have to start off in the zones like that, where you have to believe certain things to be able to get to love and honesty and integrity and truth, which seem to me to be one could incorporate in the word God. But I don't like the ascension with being lied to. So there's a lot of discussion in our country right now. I hope it doesn't happen in yours. That everything is ajar, because people are simply not telling the truth. And we have an organization, Fox News, that has just been pumping this out for 22 years, and you end up becoming discombobulated. So, how is it that I would end up playing a god? Because it's sort of easy, you know. It's sort of easy, you know. It's the God. It's not the God that I would like. It's the God that people. It's the caricature God. So, and I think that with Star Trek, I think I was able to show towards the end that I actually began to like the humans, and I was concerned about them, and I wanted them to do well and to succeed.
Okay, thank you.
How do you think Q would take everything nowadays? Do you think he would just be like,
what's that?
How do you think Q would respond to current situation, Earth? You'd just be like, that's it for me? All right, go ahead. What's your question?
Hi, yeah, with the upcoming Starfleet Academy helmed by Patrick Stewart, what do you think the chances are of Q taking an interest and possibly wreaking havoc on Starfleet Academy? Or are you allowed to tell us?
You mean geriatric Q? Is it going to be like in an old folks' home where Patrick and I are running up and down the halls? I have no idea what they have in mind. But let me tell you something. It's a little bit like worrying about whether you're going to be invited to somebody's dinner party. I don't think about it at all. so, you know, when the time comes, if the time comes, we'll see what somebody has in mind, and I'll take it from there.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Over to you. What's your question?
Hi, I just want to say welcome back to Hal-Con. It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
So, my question is, because you're hosting the symphony this weekend, is there a particular score or a movie soundtrack that you really would love to hear the symphony do?
Oh, well, we are going to be doing Supergirl, Batman, Star Trek, Star Wars. I mean, they're playing a lot of different shows there, so a lot of different film music there. So I think people are going to have something there that they like. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We came to the right place.
Thanks for coming again to Nova Scotia. Wondering, with the early episodes of playing Q on Next Generation, I mean, there was a lot of theatricality and humor in your presentation. I'm wondering how much of that was following the script and director's instruction versus consultation and able to bring your own creativity to the role?
Well, I mean, you're asking essentially an acting question. If you want to know what somebody brings to a role, turn the sound off and see how much is still being told with no words. When I did the role, I came in, I had to audition for it. I was already playing a character, Raoul Amundsen, who was the Norwegian explorer and the person who ended up going to the South Pole first. It was a big, dramatic, really aggressive character. So I was sort of primed. I came in there, I knocked it off, done, got the role. When I went to start filming, I began saying to them, listen, you know, we can't keep on playing this always boom, boom, not knocking on, frontal like that. There are areas here which have the kind of winks and nods. The director did not agree with me, and he kept on saying, "Oh no, you're undercutting, And I went, yeah, I am undercutting because some of this is sort of silly. So, and I need to show that I am a little more dangerous than just always knocking. So that first one was probably the most monolithic. And I figured that was the last one, first and last. But then they asked me to come back, and I began to, introduce a little more humor. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question as to what I brought to the thing. Our job is to take two-dimensional words on a script, ideas, and actually make them three-dimensional. And if you don't bring yourself to the role, then the next person should be playing it. There's something about each role that needs to be filtered through yourself. And that makes it unique. And the more you can do that, the more the role touches you, and the more you can bring that to the forefront for the audience to see, the more that they will understand where you're coming from. I mean, I've made a career of playing essentially jerks, and some of them monstrous jerks. I'm thinking of one right now. I played Bebow, who was a real-life person who ran the ghetto of Lodz during World War II. Even for somebody like Bebow, it's important for me to be able to present to the audience, to play it in such a way that the audience will say, oh, whoa, I understand where he's coming from. I really dislike that person, but I understand where he's coming from. And that's the difference between just playing a villain or playing a villain as if the villain were a hero. So, and that's sort of how I approached Q.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I feel like every time I'm traveling in a hotel somewhere, I always see, oh yeah, give it up. I always see Next Generation popping up on TV somewhere. When you are flipping through the channels, do you stop down and
No.
maybe no? You're like, oh, I remember that, or
No,
that was
no. All right, next.
All right, over to you.
Yeah, Tanner, glad you're enjoying the Maritimes. The big difference between out here and Saskatchewan, though,
That's
is
true.
It's called hills, is what we have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I got elevation sickness earlier.
John, my curiosity in this is if it came down to Thanos and Q in kind of like a dirty
To who? Between who?
Thanos and Q.
So Thanos, the Avengers, the almighty villain who
Really? You don't
snaps
know?
his fingers and the whole. I mean, spoiler.
Yeah,
alert.
yeah. Okay, go
Spoiler,
ahead.
spoiler.
Okay.
So who has the faster and bigger snap if it's in like a Western type of standoff here?
Well, Q, of course, for God's sake. I don't even know who the other person is, but Q. It's funny. I have been asked so many of those types of questions, but I just didn't know that character. And tomorrow in the concert, I actually mentioned that people have asked me, well, if it were Godzilla or Q, who would win? It's like, all right, Thanos, huh? Yeah.
Thanos,
Q.
it's always Q. The answer is always Q.
Yeah. Except for Batman.
Oh.
Batman sort of freaks me out a little bit.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, you've been in so many iconic roles, and I guess everyone here kind of knows you, or most people, I guess, for Star Trek or My Little Pony. Kind of what do you want to be remembered for?
I remember as a kid, as a 20-year-old kid, seeing about Ray Bolger, who was in The Wizard of Oz, and when he died, they simply had just one line, best known for Wizard of Oz, and yet I knew him from my studying acting in New York and what have you, had a resume like this. And I realized that Q was going to end up being kind of the tomato that's stuck on the wall. I have done a lot of shows that you haven't seen. Many of them are plays. Many of them are with symphony orchestras. Many of them are in opera, directing operas, and on and on and on. So when you include Q or My Little Pony, I have to say that my balloon is deflating as I am up on this stage. But I'm glad that I gave pleasure to people in that way. And that's about as much as I can think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the documentary, Bronies. So where did that idea?
Yes, there we go.
Where did
Bronies.
that idea come from? What made you want to?
Oh, well, that idea was sort of fun. I got a call saying from my agent, John, you have an offer to do. That's how it went into my head. It was my voiceover agent. He said, and I knew it was going to be a voiceover. It made no difference. I went, okay. And they'd like you to read the script. Could you do that right away? And I said, sure, send it over. So they sent it over right away, and I read it. I read 3 pages of it, and I called them back, and I said, it's fine. I mean, it's a kid's show, for Christ's sake. I mean, I just needed to make sure it wasn't something terrible. And I said, sure. I recorded it. It took, I prepped it at the night before. I'm very dyslexic, so I have to just make sure that all the words are going in a straight line. And And the next morning, I did it, and or whatever, and never to be thought of again. Never to be thought of again. And about 3 months later, I went down to my computer, and there in my own personal mailbox were about 300 or 400 emails. And they all said MLP, and I'm going, MLP, what's it? And then My Little Pony, and I made the connection. And I called up to my wife, and I was not happy. I said, what do you know about My Little Pony? And she said, well, it's a voiceover that you did. They sent the check. And it's a cartoon for little girls. I said, well, let me tell you something. These are not little girls that are writing me. So I called my agent and I said, what do you know about this? He goes, I don't know. This is not something religious that you got me involved in, is it? He said, no. I said, well, let me tell you, this looks like a petri dish for pedophiles. That's I'm staying away from this one. And that night, a friend of mine came over, and I told him the story, and he said, well, we should do a documentary. He was a documentarian. I said, I am not touching this with a 10-foot pole. I know nothing about it. I just stepped into this, and it would be really presumptuous of me to do anything. End of the story. I go to Vancouver to shoot something, and some very polite 20-year-old guys come up to me, and they said, Mr. DeLancie, would you sign our autograph, or sign the thing? And it was of my character. I went, oh. My Little Pony. Now, why is a 20-year-old guy watching a cartoon for 8-year-old girls? And they said, oh, well, it's because of blah, 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 blah. I went, oh, okay, I'll sign it. Well, this took place for about 3 or 4, or I was up there for, 10 days or so. This took place maybe every other day. And I had done a show with, I had a company actually with Leonard Nimoy, a company that I created called Alien Voices. And I asked Leonard to be involved, and the two of us, we did Alien Voices. And I would talk to him about something that was of great interest to me. Leonard, you were on a failed television show. 3 years, back in 1965, as a failed television show. When did you begin to feel that something was taking place? And we would talk about that time, not between the show and then great acclaim, but right in here. And that would be, people would call him up and say, could you come to our place in, Kansas City? And it's at a restaurant, and there are like 50 of us and stuff like that. And he began to say, well, this was right around in here. Well, I began to realize, I think I'm in on the beginning of something, because these young men were all, first of all, very polite, smart, interested for reasons that I would not have interested me, but I was of another generation. And I just thought, oh, there's something there. When I was up there, still up in Vancouver, my friend, who had not stopped thinking about it, wrote me and said, I think you need to take a look at this. And you noticed I made that comment before about Fox News. I'm not a fan. And he said, and it was, I opened up the links and I watched it. Bronies, the latest in the degradation of culture in America. Bronies are a bunch of homosexuals who live at home on food stamps and disability so that they can watch cartoons in their parents' basement. And I went, wow, that is really wrong. And I called them back up and I said, okay, we're going to make this. You know, they're going to need, these kids need some cover. I don't really understand why, I mean, this was at the time, I understand now. I didn't understand why they were interested in the show, but whatever the reason was, it seemed to me to be far more developed and far more something that I could get behind than what was being said on the news. So that's how I got it.
Anything that particularly stood out for you as you kind of dissected that world? Anything that really surprised you? Or just...
Oh, it sort of all surprised me. I mean, it was sort of fun. I mean, Mike and I decided, because he's done this before, I said, so how much, you know, who's going to pay for this? How are we going to do this? And this was just when Kickstarter had started. And he said, I think that we can do it for $60,000. And I said, wow, really? And he said, well, you know, if we need more, we'll ask for more and stuff like that. We got $320,000, I think.
It was the second highest grossing Kickstarter campaign for a film, I believe. Yeah.
So I said, all the money has to be up on the screen. And the first thing we did is that we ended up buying cameras. I think we brought 4 or 5 cameras. And when we went to New York to go to this convention, I said to the people, the guys behind the camera, I said, listen, I don't know what we're walking into, but I just want you to follow whatever you find to be interesting. Let's, you know, and so we went along and just kind of blindly followed. Like Star Trek, it was an umbrella. You know, Star Trek, when I was a kid, 1965, those of us who were interested in science fiction were usually the kids who were not interested in sports. And it was you know, sort of a binary choice. You're either a sports fan or you're a sci-fi fan. What Gene was able to do with science fiction and Star Trek in particular, was to create an umbrella. And that umbrella, as it got larger and larger, began to bring more and more people in. Essentially an umbrella to get away from the shade, or to get away from the sun, the glare, the difficulty of life. It was an opportunity to find sanctuary. Well, these kids, the bronies, this was an opportunity to find sanctuary. And there are many of them that came to us and said, is this a film that my parents would be able to watch? Will I be able to show this film to my parents? Because so many of the parents thought, oh, well, you know, what does this mean? And understandably so. I understood. I mean, I raised 2 boys, and I you know, if the kids are playing with, you know, what do you call it? Pinkie Pie horses, you kind of go, oh, where am I going with this? You know, but I love the fact that we were in this new world, which this did not necessarily mean exactly what you thought. I remember filming one kid who said to me, I mean, a guy with a beard, a guy from New York, and he talked like this and everything else. You know, and he had his thumbs were painted. He had fingernail polish, and he goes, you know, a year ago, if somebody had told me that I was going to be at a brony convention, I would have socked them. And I just thought, isn't this interesting? How this is all changing, and that I really like that slice in the world. That things that you think you know are actually not quite what you know, and that you can continue to walk forward not in fear all the time. So that's how we shot it, and in the end, I think that we developed a film that was really quite positive. Yeah.
Does it change your perspective as an actor, knowing that you're creating things that have such an impact on people, even with Star Trek as well as, fans that are. I mean,
Well, you can't go into it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, you go into it doing your job. You go into it doing it as well as you can. You go into it as, as professionally as you can, and you commit to it. I had a talk with the conductor a couple of days ago. I mean, they asked me to do it, so I said, well, let's write a whole new show. Let's write a show that talks about this music, and since I'm the host, let's make it personal. So I worked as much on this show as I worked on shows for the New York Philharmonic. And if you approach everything that way, then sometimes it really works out.
And then you also don't really, besides your on-stage work, you don't really get to connect to the audience. So how does it feel to come to a con like this and actually...
Well, a con like this, even though you're all in the dark, is that the way in which I think of it is that when you do a play, you have an audience, and I don't see the audience, and so this is exactly like I'm on stage with an audience. But when the show is over, I take off my makeup, take off my, put on my street clothes, and I go to the stage door. And there are always 3 or 4 people, or 6 or 7 people, with their playbill, and they want you to sign, and then, make some comments about the play, and, a question or two. Well, this is the extension of that. I mean, what's so bizarre is that this is a show I did 30 years ago. So I'm still talking about it. I like it, for people who don't know this at all, and there are lots of people in my profession who they've heard about it, but they don't know. I would say, I said to a friend of mine who was an actor, I said, it's like having made a delicious meal 30 years ago. And now people keep on asking you about that meal. Except they know all the stories. They know all the stories. So that when you say, you say, well, we had a steak and then some potatoes. No. You went to the grocery store. Yes, I went to the grocery store and then I got the potatoes. No, you lifted each potato into the light and you took that potato. It's a little bit like it's like telling stories to, bedtime stories, to the kids.
It's like a book someday. It should be like John DeLancie, My Life as a Casserole, or something like that. I feel like we have a title there.
That's right.
Well, we have more time for a couple more audience questions. So let's get back to those audience questions. So go ahead.
So you've been in quite a few shows and maybe movies. What was your favorite one being in?
Oh, wow. Well, it's usually, how old are you?
10.
10, all right. Well, I was going to talk to you about working with Peter Weir and Terry Gilliam, and then I thought, no, it's not going to work out. I'll tell you what my kids would say to me, who were around 10 years old. They would rate my movies by the craft service table. Craft service table are the guys that run around that have little food on that are available to kind of keep your energy up and what have you. So I would say, I forget which movie it was. In any case, there was one movie in which they go, "Oh, Dad, that was a great movie. They served sushi. They had donuts." Usually it has to do with whether you're going to have a good time, whether you have a good time and it's a good working experience. So I've had a couple of them. Hand That Rocks the Cradle, which you are not allowed to watch, and Fearless, which it's too early to watch. I had a great time actually doing a soap opera For about 3 years, I did a soap opera called Days of Our Lives. And all I can think of with that soap opera is that I mostly spent my time laughing. And it really comes down to that. Okay, next.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, what is your question?
Hello. Of course, you've done a lot of voiceover work. Wondering if you could tell us a bit about working on StarCraft 2?
StarCraft, is that Alarak?
It is, yeah.
I play this character called Alarak, and he speaks like this all the time. You know, I mean, I finally, I'm in the middle of a session, I go, excuse me. I think Alarak has an anger management problem. They said, yes, he does. I said, you know, I think it would be really nice if you created a scene where you see Alarak relaxing. Maybe watercolors or knitting. I enjoy doing voiceovers. They're fun. I enjoy them. I look forward to them. I can't tell you right now. That's true. I really can't tell you that, can I? Oh boy. But I went off to Barcelona to do one just recently, and that's a long way to go for a voiceover. And I just saw somebody pull out their phone. So I don't know. I mean, can you be specific as to what you want to know?
Just wondering if there's any sort of difference between doing a game voiceover, say, as opposed to like the work you did on My Little Pony or other voiceover things?
Sure. The game version, My Little Pony is still a script. I mean, it's a full. It reads like a regular script. The games don't read quite that way. They're, in that respect, they're not quite as satisfying. I don't feel that you have scenes in that kind of classic way. But I often spend my time, actually, well, I always spend my time doing one thing, which is that I try to visualize the audience so that I have a composite in my face as to who this person is who's playing the game. I'm very involved in Star Trek timelines. I did a lot of early writing with that, and that's gone on to being quite successful. So that's my involvement, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, well, we're down to 1 minute, so maybe we have time for one more question if we can squeeze it in. So you are the last question, sir, so you go ahead.
Hi, John. Welcome back to Canada. Given that someone appears to have stepped on a lizard and we're all living in the alternate universe, I was wondering if you plan on voting in the upcoming midterm election and if you believe it's important for celebrities such as yourself to encourage others to do the same.
Of course I'm going to vote. I think it's really important that people vote all the time. When you consider that democracy in Athens was everybody came into that stadium to talk about what needed to be done. Excuse me, that's not true. Slaves and women did not. So we have progressed since then, but it was full participation. For the people who could vote, it was full participation. And it's really sad when you think, at least in the United States, that you get 20 or 30 or whatever it is, paltry amount of people who voted. I don't know about celebrities giving their opinions. I just don't know. I don't know. I try to stay a little bit under the wire about that and work in more specific things that have interested me for a very long time, mostly having to do with the difference between believing and thinking. What do you believe? What do you think? And I'm more in the area of what do you think? So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, because it's a matter of how successful you can be. Mostly I would just like to say that people should vote. How's that? Everybody should vote.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, I guess that's all the time we have for our Q&A. I've been holding on to that all day. All right, give it up for John DeLancie, everybody.
Hal-Con.